So Evolution MX, as we have it, is a fully integrated accounting solution suitable for the construction industry. Down the left-hand side, you can see the full options that are available, covering the likes of job costing, contract management, purchase ledger, sales ledger, invoicing, applications, the payroll, covering all of the legislative requirements and coverage there for weekly and monthly payrolls, nominal for your financials, trial balance, management reports, cash book, bank reconciliation and the like, and then optional modules that can be included for the likes of purchase ordering, control of document management, storing all the documents that are created within your Evolution MX system, as well as being able to incorporate other documents from outside, and a number of other modules there as well. Our main focus, as I said today, is to do with the subcontractors. The menu structure will allow us to access all of the functionality available to that particular area of the system, whether it's the creation of new subcontractor records, inquiry upon the current position of particular subcontractors or the engagements with them, reporting on, making postings as well. And you can use the menu option if you prefer. Menu access is what often is the preferred route of access. That can be tailored per user. So if you've got a number of users accessing the system, you can be assured that they'll only be able to go into the areas that are relevant to them or that they're allowed to go into. So the likes of the payroll and the nominal ledger can be completely excluded. And then access to the system is restricted on a license basis. As well as the menu access, some people prefer the use of dashboards because they give quite a great visual overview of where you are in a particular area. So I've got a dashboard here which I've constructed, and they are freely constructed by you as individuals, or we can do those for you as part of any implementation, to contain the different aspects or areas that are of interest to you, whether they be a summary of information relating to what's happening within the subcontractors, a summary report in terms of transactional values, maybe graphical representations. Maybe there are also access to other areas or other functions that could negate the need for you to even have menus at all. So you could suppress menus and run purely from a dashboard orientated system. A lot of people prefer this method because it can summarize all of the areas that are relevant to them in one place, including any reports that would save them having to go off and run in detail elsewhere. Okay, now within the system, I could choose to make this my home screen. So rather than having to find it every time I log into the system, I'm just going to flag it at the top there to say that that is my preferred home screen. So I'll be able to see that every time I enter Evolution MX. Some of the access beneath the system could be through the use of drill down. So on my awaiting verification tile there, which is telling me I've got 4 subbies who have yet to be satisfactorily verified for CIS purposes, I could click on the details there to be able to see what those 4 records represent. So more details relating to each of those. And I can tailor the drill down aspects are given to me here just by choosing to include as many or as few fields relating to that data as I wish. I've deliberately filtered that tile to say only show those that are awaiting verification, and that filter can be set to your own requirements for any of these tiles. So if I were to clear it and filter it again, I'll now have access to all of my subbies, not just those that are awaiting verification. And this could allow us to go into any of the subcontractors just by highlighting where they are in blue, clicking on them. I then have access to a full subcontractor transaction or order inquiry, where I could drill into the details of the subcontractor and be able to see full information about them. Included there would be an indication of, in this particular subcontractor who has been verified, there's details of what the verification status is at the bottom. And there's also a useful history button, which can be used to see what has happened historically in relation to verification. You know, when did it happen? What was the result of the previous entry and so forth? Okay, back to our main screen. Another of the tiles there you'll have seen related to the all-important tracking of subcontractor insurance. So I've got an indication there saying there are 8 subbies whose public liability insurance has been recognised as being expiring within the next month if it's not already expired. Click on the item there and you'll be taken then down to a list showing you the subcontractors where that insurance has now lapsed. Within here, again, we can drill into the subcontractor inquiry. This time what I might want to do is to take advantage of some of the extra functionality we've got here, which would allow for sending out correspondence to the subcontractors. So rather than that particular subcontractor, if I list all of my subbies, I could here display all of the subbies who have got particular insurance recognitions. So for example, if I were to just filter and say, let's have a look at all subbies whose insurance has expired in the month of April, or is due to expire in the month of April. And within here, I can use functionality which allows integration directly with Microsoft Office 365 as a variant is included there as well. So it's a mail merge function here, which would allow you to browse to your own choice of how you might want to correspond to those subcontractors. Normally, you just let it run and fulfill its course, but I'm just going to interrupt it just so we can see what's happening. So it's basically taking those 4 subcontractor records and is passing them over to Microsoft Word. At the bottom, you can see there's a template letter that you've defined with whatever wording you want on there. We could preview the results to see exactly what's going to happen in terms of who's going to be sent the information and how they're going to be addressed. Using now Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word here, I could now choose to send them as emails or print them using whatever you want as your message subject text. And doing that will immediately merge and send them out through Outlook as emails. So it's a one-stop shop. Not just looking after the financial side of your subcontractors, but also dealing with the administration side of things as well. Okay, let's come back out then, go back to our subcontractors. From here, if I just call up a particular subcontractor within the system, in fact, what I'll do is rather look at the inquiry of the information. Let's use a tile access, which is independent of the insurance. Down at the bottom, I've got subcontractor maintenance, which would let me go in and decide who I want to have a look at in more detail. So launching the program as I've got here, I can search for or just enter details relating to the subcontractor I'm interested in. Full details of them are provided, including an indication over on the right-hand side there. You can see the insurance, public liability insurance certificate number and the expiry date. There's also capability for the terms section here, to be able to say that somebody has got retention of a certain amount that is going to be suggested each time. We're not saying that every time you engage with them it has to be that, but that could be set as your default. You've also got over on the right hand side here towards the top, you've got agreement date and expiration dates, which could be set if you need to prepare your own validation checks or authorizations on subcontractors, so that you're not by mistake engaging with a subcontractor who hasn't been validated or verified for your own internal purposes over and above anything else that might be happening. Okay, the main tab there incidentally also shows other defaults relating to what kind of subbie they are in terms of bona fide, supply fix or labour only, and how you would normally engage with them. Well, how's the payment going to be dealt with? Is it going to be on an invoice or an application basis or authenticated receipt? Other areas of the system that can be set per subcontractor, you've got a contacts tab there, which allows you to say how you're going to communicate with this particular subcontractor in terms of the different types of documents that are available to be sent to subcontractors. You can choose to print or email each of those, and they can not necessarily go to the same email address. You can have a choice there as to how that might happen. Also, skills tab at the top there allows you to manage your own skills database in terms of skills and certifications that might be required or are held by different subcontractors. That's your own choice of whatever you have in the skills library. So there's just an example of the sort of headings that typically people might want to use. Each of them can have its own certificate details, expiration date, and also the attachment of specific documents to that particular skill, should that be a requirement. We've also got user-defined capabilities, not restricted to the subcontractors, but in this particular area, this is showing us how we can choose to store additional information that's relevant to our subcontractor records. So that could include other fields that we haven't already incorporated within the system, and these could involve the use of choice fields, where you choose what the choice of options are that are available to you. Okay. Also, a very important part of the system is down at the bottom, we've got the document option, which will show you everything that currently exists in terms of documents in relation to this particular subcontractor. This will be automatically populated and updated by the actions elsewhere in the system. So every time a payment certificate or a remittance is sent to a subcontractor, it will be produced and emailed or printed and then stored within the library, allowing you to be able to highlight it to be able to see exactly what it was. details of it, those can then be emailed around or printed if you wish to give a secondary copy. And it's your choice as to how many headings you have here. So ones I've got would be those that the system is taking care of with the preparation on a day-to-day basis, but you could have other areas in there for photographs and Excel files, Word documents, whatever you want, as headings to store the different relevant documents to you. Now, the basis of Evolution MX's engagement with subcontractors is around the principle of subcontractor orders. So just using, again, from this dashboard, if I go into subcontractor inquiry, here we can pick up on particular subcontractors in pretty much the same way as we did within the maintenance, but obviously inquiries is a look, don't touch aspect. And this will initially say that for this particular subcontract, we've got a number of different engagements. So we've got a handful of different orders relating to the different contracts that you've got in your system. You can see you can have multiple engagements for the same contract. So my job number 0737 there has got an engagement of order number 120, but also a secondary engagement under order 145, which could be for something completely different under that the job, or it could be a means of being able to record a variation order, for example. To store the details specifically related to that extra requirement. This particular subcontractor would normally engage on an applications basis. So the screen affords the display of application values and gross certified values, outstanding amounts, retentions, and so forth. Different subcontractors might have different engagement methods. So if I switch to a different subby here, we can see that there are no applications involved on this particular subcontractor. They are purely provide the value of the order engagement and so far what's been gross and any retention associated. This particular subcontractor also shows how we can have multi-job facilities. So this may be a subby who works on a number of different smaller jobs on an infrequent or irregular basis. And you don't really want to go at the time and trouble of having to set up a separate order engagement just to cater for that small amount of work. So a multi-job order can be set up against a subby to say you can use it on any job. It just then will store all of the details together, irrespective of what job it is, although still allow for the job costing to be updated on the specific job that is held in within your contract ledger. And there's also a capability here for this particular subby to involve the use of timesheets. This is useful in a scenario where you get very little or nothing, in fact, in terms of information from the subcontractor, other than maybe a timesheet or something less formal, a text or an email indicating what work they've been involved in. And we can cater for that side of things as well. That's probably the most straightforward. So let's have a look at how we would involve this particular subcontractor should they be providing us with timesheet information. So from the menu this time, I'm going to use my timesheet option there. Enter a timesheet. Now I could, as the name suggests, choose to enter details on the timesheet that I've had provided through other means, but I'm going to choose the option right at the bottom there to use import. Okay, and this is where I can choose to look for the file that has been created. Don't worry too much about the layout of the form, because we can have this formatted and mapped to the fields that are relevant to what you can provide. So I'll show you the result of this initially. So that is going to take the information from that file. It's giving me warnings here telling me that in the occasion of a subcontractor ABC, their insurance is expired. It is just a warning, it's not going to stop it, but you can see here how it's interpreted from that source file the 3 different jobs that subby has worked on, and in their case it's purely a value that's going to be recorded. It could alternatively or additionally be a number of hours that's going to be recognized against their stored rate. So you've got choices there as to how that information can be provided. I'll update that. That will have taken it into my timesheets, although not yet processed them further, so it just saved me the time and trouble of having to key anything in. At this point then, if I rather than do the import this time, I'll just jump straight back to ABC. We can see how get a warning about their insurance expiry again, and now the system has updated and got ready for processing those 3 jobs with the values associated. And you can see we've equipped ourselves to be able to put in standard hours and overtime hours, as well as a fixed payment as well. So there's lots of scope for being able to build up the required value for the payment. Okay, and that can be added to and stored until you're ready to take it further. Okay, having fulfilled the input of the timesheets, then we can do an update timesheets just to tell the system, right, that's the end of my timesheets that I processed I just want to draw a line under them. They'll all be listed there for any other subbies you may have done it for. And then we can just certify just to say that's that period closed in terms of input. So we can now start the next week. And then as and when we're ready to, we can pay the timesheets that have just been updated. Okay, allowing us to be able to say, well, I'm paying them for all of those that are due between now and the end of May. That's going to list them all, allow you to select individually which ones are to be paid. There's a quick tick all button at the bottom. So if there's a multiple lines there, then it's easy to just hit that rather than have to go through individually. And that will now create the necessary backs or printed checks required to be sent to the subcontractor. And we can just quickly have a look at what the system will do there in terms of the correspondence. So this would be the remittance. I'm happening to call it a subcontractor payslip. It's entirely up to you what the document is called. It could incorporate your company logo, top left-hand corner there, nice blank space left for that. And that's basically just confirmation to the subby of what they've been paid and any deductions associated. Also indication there, of course, of the reverse charge requirements, which you'll all be familiar with, came into play on the 1st of March last. So we are fully compliant with that side of things. Okay, that blue lines on the screen is just a system storing that document in the same place that we saw those documents against the subcontractors earlier. Those have now been stored against the subcontractor record. Okay, now other engagements on a subcontractor basis would start traditionally with a purchase order. So we can affect that by going into the purchase order menu this time. Now we've also got scope for material orders for your normal supplier and purchase of parts and from a price list, for example. I'm just going to use the subcontract order processing, which is contained within the purchase order menu. And I'll go and enter a new order. So let's, for the first example here, select a job from my list. I can browse to all of the jobs that I've got, be able to select them in a similar way that you saw me using this for selection of subcontractors' expiry dates. You can choose what fields are available to assist you with the searching. So I'm just going to grab up a particular job number. The system will take care of the numbering in terms of purchase order with a handy prefix as an indication of the job number that this purchase order relates to. Okay, and I can select from my subcontractor database subby that I want to get involved with. The system is continually checking on this insurance expiry, and that is an option as to whether you get it to do that. Most people prefer it. Can become a bit annoying, but it just kind of prompts you to do something about it. And on this particular occasion, I'm going to go to the category option at the bottom to say, well, what does this engagement or this purchase order involve as far as the subcontractor is concerned? So I can just, from my list of work categories, and this would be your choice as to what you might want to include here. You can have as many or as few different variants there as you wish. They are just headings, but they are also geared up to be able to post to the correct cost head structure against your contract and ultimately update the nominal ledger. The wording can be set as standard, but you are free to be able to copy and paste into that for more descriptive text surrounding the value of the work that's been done. Bottom section then is to put in your figures. So I'll just say the 500 quid's worth of measured work. You'll notice things like the retention are coming through from the default terms for that subcontractor, and those can be observed or changed as you wish to for this particular engagement. Hit the category button again, and we can pick from the outstanding list something different, and maybe there say the value is 200 quid. That may or may not be applicable to retention, so you can choose to change it or remove it on this particular line. You'll notice over on the right-hand side as well that this particular line has got the including tax calculation set to no. So it knows that CIS is not applicable to engagements that involve this particular line in terms of materials. The labour one had got that set to yes. So you've got that ability to split that source so that the CIS calculation becomes correct. So I can just update that. If I print at this stage, it's actually going to email it. And that will pick up on the subcontractor's email address, send it out through your normal email service, and also store a copy of that purchase order against not only the subcontractor record, but also against the contract to which that the engagement relates. It's also going to update the all-important committed cost visibility on the contract. So whilst you haven't yet been billed for the work underneath this, this purchase order, the system will recognise as a committed cost. So you get a forward visibility of costs due to hit the contract at some future date. So that's the job done. Whilst I'm here, I'm just going to do another purchase order for that second type of subcontractor. So same idea here, different subcontractor. So I'll just select them from my list. they too have got insurance expiring, so I'm not doing too well there. This particular subby has been set to be application based, so the system is just requesting that you confirm that there's going to be an application for this particular engagement, and then as before you can carry on going through and putting in details of the value. So let's say £1,000 here. Again, I'll just observe the defaults here, and we'll put in some materials as a value as well. Okay, now, as we can with all purchase orders, you've got an option to be able to preview what is going to be happening in terms of the production of the document, just so you can see if it's going to make sense. Is there enough detail on there for the subcontractor to be able to react to? If you want to, you've got the option of being able to add other documents. So hitting the document button within the purchase order that I am now will open up a window into which I can drag and drop another document. So if I've got a more detailed breakdown or a picture or a diagram or a photograph or something, I can drag that in and have that now available to be included alongside that purchase order as it's stored as a document. So that's a good way of being able to work with more detail. Okay, as I print, this is going to, as before, send the document out through email. You can have an always attach rule. So if you want your T's and C's to be incorporated with every transmission of an email, then that can be set to detect where that file is and pick it up and automatically send it out as an attachment to the email. That means we don't need to get involved with any variations you've got in terms of conditions. You can manage that document yourself. You just tell us where it is and we'll set the rule and say always attach it. Okay, so we've got a couple of purchase orders on there, ready to have the next level of engagement with that subcontractor. So for the first example, if I just now revert back to my subcontractors menu there, and if I go into the postings option, I can post a transaction. ABC, the subcontractor, had been set to have invoice as their method of engagement. So I can select here that that's kind of batch I'm going to want to do. If there's a particular type of transaction that you do more of, you can set it as the default to save you having to select it every time from here. So if you're doing mostly invoices, that can be set to say it's an invoice unless I tell it otherwise. So I'll just go in here, put in the details, select my subcontractor, again, be told about the insurance, and then hitting the F4 is going to show me all the engagements I've got for that subcontractor, showing me the multi-job one, which is available to me, as well as the new one right at the very bottom, the one that I created for the 700 quid. So I'll just call that up. And we'll be able to here put in details about what the subcontractor's got in terms of referencing, maybe a scan of an image that could be associated with that. So by using a barcode reference here to link to a scanned image, we can now attach that to become extra backup documentation to do with the posting. Okay, and if I just say OK at the bottom, it's then going to invite me to say, well, against the order lines, what's the values that are now being invoiced? So I could be saying, well, there's, irrespective of what the actual order was, we could be putting in the values that are relevant for this claim on this invoice. That's then going to show you the appropriate calculations in terms of what I had accepted at the order in terms of retention, discount. It's also telling me the taxable amount, any VAT. You'll notice how the reverse charge is automatically kicked in at that point. You are free to change anything that's highlighted in white if you didn't take the opportunity to do so when you were raising the purchase order. But all being well, that's all you should need to do, and we can just OK, calculation complete. Okay, that will then post the invoice. Nothing more required there. And similar to what we saw with the timesheet entries, that's now available to be updated. So the invoice payment update, just draw your attention to something in there that's going to be relevant, is we're saying here, let's have a look at all invoices that are due. Let me just drag it forward to the end of next month, just in case the terms haven't been covered. It will tell you, well, these are the invoices that you can now update. The bottom one isn't available to be updated because that subby has yet to have their verification details updated in the system. So that's a final check, really, if you like, to stop you from updating something that you really can't because you don't know what the CIS rules are on it. So at this point, I can just go through, and very similar to what we saw before, we've got the ability now to create that BACS file to be able to transmit off to the bank, but also I can print the document. And then, of course, print is going to email it in the case of most subbies nowadays. This time we're calling it remittance advice. So different documents for different types of engagement. Okay, now for the other subcontractor, That was a bit more involved. So we've got the option there to use the postings this time will be to post an application in relation to that secondary order that we had. So I'm going to choose my option there for application, and taking us through, I'm going to say it's UK ducting. Again, insurance is a bit of a nuisance. F4 is going to show me all the engagements for that particular subby. So I'm going to pick up on the new one that we just did, the 156. And here I'll be able to also put in a document if I wanted to. At this point of entry, all we're expected to do is to put in the value of the application, nothing in any more detail, because what we're going to involve is an element of the system called authorization of payment, where maybe somebody in an admin capacity can do this amount of logging of the application. It's up to the QS and or the contract manager to get involved in signing off the actual values that they want to process through to payment. So all I've done there is I've logged the application. Now, authorization of payments is an optional part of the system. It doesn't have to exist. My menu is allowing me access to it. It will, by definition, recognize who the QS is on the contract primarily and make it something that's going to form their to-do list. So as a result of that application having been processed, I can now go through the authorization of payments option. If I am the QS themselves, then I can go directly into the list, and it will show me, as I mentioned, my to-do list. So it's saying you as a QS have got these applications to process. If you weren't that person, and maybe they were incapacitated for whatever reason, then there is a supervisor option. So that allows somebody in a more senior or an admin capacity to step in on behalf of and deal with the outstanding authorizations. So you're not having to wait for the 2 weeks until they come back from holiday. Somebody else can be dealing with them. So I'm going to just call up that detail. That's going to show me the content of the purchase order in columns across the top. So the fact I've got a breakdown of work and materials makes it easier for me to be able to say what has been okayed for payment in terms of each of those. So I could just go in and say, let's say 1,050. You'll notice that it's telling you on the left-hand side the value of the application that's been processed, and also down to the bottom right there, you've got an indication of the order value. So the purchase order was for 1,500 quid. They've raised an application of 1,100. You're signing off 1,050. So you've got that capability of varying from the different aspects of the system. Now, because we're not making a full payment on that, we might want to use the notes at the bottom there to give an indication as to why we're not making the full payment. That's suitable for the subcontractor to see. So that could support any sort of pay less agreements you've got, just to say we're not paying you because of this, that and the other, as notes that the subcontractor is going to say. If you want to put in internal notes that the subcontractor is not going to see, then that's up to you to perhaps put the real reasons to why the payment's not being made in full. The payment date has been taken from the terms on the subcontractor. That could have been available to be input if that's your preference. So if I just say OK at this point, that's going to tell me measured works exceeds budget, which basically means that was over the value of it on the order. So if you remember when I put the purchase order on, I just put it on for 1,000. I'm saying it's 1,050 on this occasion. So we're just going to say OK and update that. Now I've got a second level of sign-off available to me. That could be detected automatically as the contract manager, who may be different on the contract from the QS. I've set the option to make that variable, which is a useful option to have, because if you've got contracts that maybe involve M&E elements where it dependent on what the element is, or depending on who the second sign-off is going to be, you can make that selection to pass it on to a different person. But if you prefer to either not have that at all, then this screen won't trouble you, or if you choose to have a second level but to pick up from the contract, again, that screen won't trouble you. So I'll just make it myself, just so you can see what's happening in the process. That is then going to be carried off by the second level sign off. Now, you saw it is me. Very unusual for it to be the same person twice. Wouldn't encourage that, but it's for demonstration purpose, it makes it easier. So sign off payment is going to only show those elements that have gone through the first stage of sign off. So that's allowing me to see here the fact that I've got that earlier approved payment. Now I'm seeing it as a second sign off. I can see the content and the detail of it. I can see the notes. I don't have to agree with it, but I can add to the internal notes and maybe reject it, and it'll go back to the QS. Now, all of this toing and froing can happen until both parties are satisfied, and as a request is sent back to the different person, they can be triggered with an email. So an email could be sent to say you need to address an application sign-off that's come back to you or just arrived with you originally. So I'm just going to say OK to that. again, I'm told about the budget or the order value being exceeded, and I'm happy with that. So that's gone through the second level sign off. That means now that it is available for a sign off document, which can be to your choosing. That's going to show you that all of those that have gone through the second level sign off and allow them to be produced in whatever format you want. So I'm being given a choice here. So I might have a withholding notice or a pay less or just an advance payment notification. That's really all this document is. It's an advance payment notification to the subcontractor, telling them what they're going to be paid and when they're going to be paid it. So it can be formatted to your requirements, indicating the dates, the order values, the application values, and how much we're paying you, and any reasoning why we've decided not to make that full payment. So that's an advance notice that can be emailed off to the subcontractor ahead of the actual payment, which you can make as and when you're happy to do so. When that occasion happens, then the next process is just to go into the subcontractor postings, post the transactions. This time I'm going to take the default option, which is offered to me, which is certificate. And because I've involved the authorization of payments, I'm going to say only look at those that have gone through the authorization of payments methodology. If you weren't involving AOP, then you can do certificates against applications that have bypassed that whole process just by saying no to that. In fact, no would be the default anyway. So I'm just going to say yes to that, in which case, as a typical accounts user, you're going to get a list of those applications that have been signed off and the value is appropriate. If I just call up on that, then we're able to see details of the fact that the insurance has expired again. It's showing me now the values that were put in by the earlier input of the QS and the contract manager. As an admin user, I am able to make certain changes, not as many as the QS, but from an accounts perspective, I might want to, for example, make a change to that taxable amount. On this particular occasion, I've been fortunate enough to be able to have the split of labour and materials recognised for separate calculations. You'll notice that in the case of the labour, the taxable amount or CIS-able amount is enabled to be altered. And that might be because you maybe didn't have knowledge of the fact that some element was materials at the time of input. So you could be reducing that to make the CIS less applicable to all elements of it. You've also got the option of being able to deal with a contra. So if you want to reduce the payment for whatever reason, then you can do so. And that will reduce the payment and post the difference off into a contra control account for you to be able to deal with later. So if I just accept that, the beauty of this is that the accounts user typically doesn't have to do very much in terms of worry about the makeup of that payment, because it's all been processed earlier by the commercial end with the QS and all the contract manager getting involved. So that allows me to just update. As before with the invoice, I've got the vital final checking on the subcontractor status. So if I just make that forward enough to be able to see what's happening. Again, I can choose to update all of them or just the single ones that I'm in particularly interested in on this occasion. I can't do that top one because, again, the verification hasn't happened. Okay, and if I just say, okay, that's going to take it through, allow for the batch file to be created, and also the printing of the payment certificate, which in this occasion we're heading as just as that authenticated receipt type transaction with the VAT included as an indication, but not as a deduction, and the VAT reverse charge statement being adhered to. Okay, so that's us posted the entries to the system. Having done that and all the documents being stored, we've got the ability then to do the rest of the requirements under CIS. The menu there is showing CIS, which allows us to do the verification process that we talked about earlier. So that would instantly poll HMRC and send the details of the UTR and update the verification details automatically onto the system. We've also got the monthly return, which I could now, having processed engagement with subcontractors, I could send the CIS 300 off to the UK Government Gateway. All that option will do is prompt you for your password and then take all the details for the CIS period through to the HMRC. The monthly statement can be done as a means of corresponding back to your subcontractors as to what's happened in your chosen CIS tax period month ending. That might be something you want to do for maybe the next month that we've just done. So if we were to bring that forward to the 5th of June. Okay, we can include subbies who are paid on a gross basis if we want to, just out of courtesy. There's no requirement necessarily to do that. A lot of people like to do that just to have a full list and a full correspondence with all of their subcontractors. Some are set to be printed, some are set to be emailed. If they're all emailed, then you can just hit the email now and they'll send them all out to the individual subbies. But if I just show you the print options, that'll give you a chance to preview here, where you can see this is the kind of statement that'll be sent to the subbie. That's a gross paid subbie, so they're not going to necessarily have any deductions there. In fact, the first 2 or 3 are gross. I think my 4th one there has got net on it. So it shows you the different engagements for that particular subbie with what's paid and what's being deducted. Okay, and those can be sent off, produced, emailed, and then the system will produce you your summary telling you as a company this is your total liability that's been covered through that CIS submission. Okay, so that's the process. You've got the option at this point to say accept. So if you were just doing it mid-month and just wanted to see what was happening, you're not necessarily compelled to set that in stone. That could be left open to be picked up at the actual end of the CIS period. So it's up to you whether you say yes or no to finalise or not at that point. Okay, so looking at what's happened on the system, incidentally, anyone who's interested, I don't believe there's anybody from Ireland logged on at the moment, but the RCT scheme for the Republic of Ireland is fully covered in relation to subcontractors as well. So if you have any interest in that particular area, we're happy to go through that with you separately. Reporting on the system, we've got options to be able to look at what's been happening subcontractor wise through analytics. So the likes there could involve my skills. We touched on skills earlier, so this could be a great way of you just checking to see, well, who have I got that's qualified in brickwork level 1? We could then see an interpretation or interrogation of the data relating to what you've got in all those different skills settings you've got against your subcontractors. If you preferred, you could maybe ungroup that kind of information and say, well, I just want to see what I've got for particular subbie, so I could then just limit and see all their skills. So you can really pull the data around in terms of that side of things. If you wanted to, you've also got transaction information available. Now, all of these analytics options are available to be tailored to meet exactly what you want to be able to do. So this is showing me a summary of everything that we've got per subcontractor. You might there want to be able to see what we've actually got in terms of applications and what is outstanding on those applications. So for a particular subcontractor here, UK Ducting, we've got an indication of the 4 applications that we've had, how much has been applied and how much has been outstanding for each of them. And it's enabling you to expand into that to see exactly what was applied and what certificates were raised in association. So it's a great way of being able to check as an alternative to going through the traditional subcontractor inquiry. The rest of the system is catered for by analytics as well. So you've got options to be able to look at information throughout, whether it be through the analytics. So you may prefer here on the contract side of things, we've had impact on the contract through our endeavours elsewhere. This could be a great way of you just checking, well, let's see, how's my whole contract workforce work related performing. So I've got here an indication of all of my jobs listed down the left hand side and my choice of columns that summarize the activity associated with each of those contracts. And as we saw briefly earlier, this is open for you to be able to pick and choose exactly what you want in terms of the content of a report, where it's showing not necessarily anything in particular. You choose whether it's going to be showing you, as in my case, all costs together. You might have separate columns for your subcontractor costs, your material costs, your labour costs, if you want to. It's entirely up to you how you make this work. And you can involve calculations there as well. So I'm including a profit margin calculation based upon whatever I see as my sales, whether that is application values or whether it's purely invoice values or recognised certified valuations. You choose and you tell the system what's happening in terms of debt and recognition of profit. We're using colour coding here as well to indicate that the green lines are telling me that there are contracts that are making me money. Slightly worrying that I've only got 3. That's just checking on the profit margin column, and where that's greater than 0, we're saying colour the line in green. You could have alternative or additional rules being shown differently. So a red line could show you contracts that are over budget. Orange ones could be contracts that are within 90% of their budget. Summary information is available at this point. If you want to, you've got the ability to drill into the detail where you could go into the actual costs, beneath which you've got the subheadings for the different cost head groups. Beneath those, you can go into the actual costs and be able to see the breakdown of all the postings that have been made by your different trade of subcontractor in this case. So these are the cost heads relating to subcontractors, where you could then expand upon particular aspects of interest, being able to see the certificate value that we put through there for what went through the application and the sign-off process and the resultant payment certificate. So we've now got a cost associated with that sitting on the contract, recognising it's come from the UK ducting subcontractor. Okay, with any other calculations on there as well. So I've included a user-defined calculation to say add 15%, just because that's what I want to use as a basis for my valuation going forward. Okay, now that information could be presented in traditional report format. You could also present that information if you wanted to across all contracts. We've got a dashboard option here as well, which is looking at information. And again, remember, these dashboards are totally configurable by yourselves in terms of what the content are, and indeed whether you want one that is contract specific or whether one that is a combination of some contract information, some subbase information, some plant information. And this is a great way of being able to say, well, let's have a look at all of my costs without having to run a report. My graphical representation of my costs is being shown, and I can click in there to the cost head graph to be able to see a breakdown. And this time it's showing me all of the costs against the different cost heads that we've got. You might say, well, that's all well and good, that's all contracts. Now let me just see how it's affected a particular contract. And now we can see the engagement there on the different cost heads. Expand upon any one of those if you want to be able to see in more detail. The red ones, incidentally, are indicating where there's been an overspend in terms of budget. So the actual cost relating to materials, decorating materials, has expanded beyond the original budget value. So I've gone over on that occasion. So that's a great way of being able to see that kind of information in summary format if you want to initially. But as before, if you prefer not, then you've got a simple ungroup option, which could then show you each of the transactions for all the different postings with as much or as little information as you want, because you've got the ability to configure and pick and choose how that information is presented. Okay, so analytics is freely available across the whole system. It is browser-based as well, so anybody who is needing to look at analytics can do so on a self-service basis without the need to have Evolution MX itself stored on the device. So they could be on a simple tablet, iPad kind of device to be able to get access to that. So that was my coverage of the Evolution MX with particular interest on the subcontractors. We've gone over time a little bit, but as you can appreciate, there's quite a lot to see there. I probably still haven't covered everything that everybody would want to see. So if you would like to have more information, then we're happy to do that as a follow-up with you at some point in the future. Just let us know on the feedback that Grace will be inviting you to complete. But I'd like to thank you all for attending and hope you found the session of interest. So thanks very much and good morning.